What's up, everybody, and welcome to the Apartment 113 podcast, where we talk with cool folks in the cannabis and psychedelics industry to learn about their projects and celebrate their successes. My name is Rob Sanchez, and for episode 3 today, we're joined by John Manlove, the CEO and founder of Apex Trading. Apex Trading elevates wholesale operations by providing a platform for buyers and sellers to connect and manage their orders. Apex Trading empowers brands and improves customer relationships with branded storefronts and more. Check out more at apextrading.com and enjoy the show. How's it going today, man? Welcome to the show.
Hey, Rob. Doing well, man. Thanks for having me. How are you?
Dude, living the dream here, living the Vegas dream. The weather down here is really in that prime spot right now, and nice in the 70s, high 60s.
Jealous. I'm in Portland. It's supposed to snow tonight, so we're on the other side of it today. Yeah,
We can bring that dynamic, yeah.
that's right.
No, I think it's excellent to have you on the show, man, and talk about something that's near and dear to my heart and career with a wholesale cannabis software that Apex provides.
Yeah, thanks for having me, man. Yeah, I mean, we're it's been wild. I'm going on almost 9 years now, specific in wholesale cannabis. So kind of turned a passion and kind of early, I guess, late childhood, I'd say, kind of teenage years into a career, man. And it's awesome to find myself here at this juncture and kind of crazy crossroads of the industry and everything going on.
It is pretty weird to think about, forging a career in cannabis, even just a decade or two ago, right? In high school or growing up, if you would mention that, it was like, you could, if you wanted to move out to the Humboldt woods or, a trailer out in the middle of nowhere, but it wasn't a real business, an industry. It's something else, seeing how fast it's just exploded, man. Cash crop.
Yeah, it is, man. I mean, gosh, I grew up in Branson, Missouri, right? And so Missouri, one of the newer adult use recreational markets, right? But going back in like high school when I was introduced to cannabis, and then, through my college years of, being a pretty, a user of cannabis products, it was always one where you're, got the hidden compartments, you're worried about this, right? You're always making sure you're not speeding, you never know. And I've actually got arrested for cannabis when I was in college. So, I even was on the other side of it, right? And paid my dues for that. And so, it's kind of wild to imagine, when I was in college, if someone asked me like, hey, you're going to have a cannabis startup one day, I would have laughed. Like, no way, man. Like, that's just not me, Like I was never really like a cannabis dealer or anything. I'd hook my buddies up here and there, but it was never something I was making money off of. It was more of a hobby and something I enjoyed. And I wanted to spread the love to the people, And so
yeah, right.
I was like the only person who could find Kind Bud or KB back in the day. So I was the hookup, the guy who could find the good green. And so I
used to think of it as
now we're running an e-commerce platform, and I've moved, through the app since I've started, probably $1 billion worth of wholesale cannabis. So it's wild to think about how far. Just the society's come, but also, business, and legitimization of the plant, which is awesome.
Right. Being able to facilitate that. I always thought about it more as facilitation. I could facilitate a deal for you or arrange an acquisition during those dark days. And now it's all above the board. It is pretty wild, man. And the quality that some of these grows and these facilities are able to create in their concentrates is wild. So a marketplace where folks can find new brands or where brands can find new potential vendors is definitely a niche that needed filling. Did you experience marketplaces like this outside of cannabis first, or is this really where you got started, or kind of how did Apex evolve to its current state?
Yeah, man. It all starts back for, our story, my story in e-commerce or marketplace cannabis, really starts back in 2014. In 2014, I was working in Portland. I lived in Portland, Oregon, and I was working for an environmental firm where I was kind of running, large industrial waste disposal cleanup, Superfund sites. Kind of dirty job, right? I was the guy overseeing it all, so I wasn't the one in the trenches. But that was what I was doing. And in 2014, I had established a pretty good career up here in the Pacific Northwest, built a pretty large company, and At that time, I got called, two of my college buddies called me like, "Hey, John, like we're going to start the Amazon of wholesale cannabis, and I was like, okay, well, that sounds interesting, right? Who doesn't want to be the next Amazon, right?
Hell
Fooled me
yeah.
there. And on the other side was like, hey, man, that's something I like. I really am, more passionate about cannabis and this plant and what it can do for society compared to, cleaning up hazardous waste, which I think has very important implications for our world and our health. But at the same time, it wasn't it wasn't always the sexiest job.
Yeah, a
Going
little
into a
nearer to the
grow, it seemed
passion.
like a hell of a lot more fun, And so, they recruited me and I helped start a company called Tradive. And Tradive was the first B2B marketplace ever in cannabis, And so the goal there was like, hey, we keep seeing this. It was back in the, pre-Prop 215 days. So it's back in the medical days of California, right? And we kept seeing like, hey, there's this big fragmented market between Northern and Southern California, being able to implement technology to connect these rural or different regions of a state together in a marketplace, an aggregate marketplace to efficiently, buy and sell products made a lot of sense, right? No one was doing it, right? I mean, adult use had just passed in Colorado. So we were at the very, very beginnings of what this industry has become at that time. And so I came on as the head of sales, head of product, ultimately became the CEO of that business. And so that was my jump into e-commerce marketplaces, and it was right into cannabis, right at the beginning stages of it.
Really saw the wild, wild west for a
Yeah,
while.
and I got to live it. We ran we spun up a distribution company in California, so we were doing plant touching and running trucks and handling lots of cash and doing that whole thing right before adult use. So this was the old days, right?
I had to leave a grow with a decoy backpack a few times.
Yeah, exactly, right? So we did that, and then we started to scale and grow the business. Unfortunately, that one didn't work out for a matter of reasons, and in 2018, early 2018, I branched off and I started Apex. And again, kind of this idea of facilitating commerce in the wholesale supply chain. But we really wanted to take like a different approach. We have a marketplace, and marketplaces are great for discovery, right? Of finding new products and brands or finding that deal. But what we really recognize is what was missing in the e-commerce space for wholesale was brands had no ability to own a buyer experience, right? They didn't know that. So if you're sending a buyer to a marketplace, they're automatically seeing all your competitors racing to the bottom. There's no loyalty. It's a tougher system unless you're
filtering for lowest price first.
Unless you're Wana or you're that high demand, in that state of wild or something that commands that buying power from the consumer. If you're in a variable SKU, a cultivation extraction market, you're getting beat up as a commodity more on shopping a potency price in a marketplace. And so we really wanted to provide that part of the market, the ability to not be on a marketplace and own the buyer experience through custom tailored storefronts. So giving them full control of a buyer experience and then accounting for all the nuances in the sales process. So prices, discounts, products, promos, you name it. Then giving them the ability to really not only own that buyer experience, but giving their team great tools to go hunt and build strong, lasting relationships with buyers. And that was really our vision with Apex is wanting to give that brand more control and then starting to build a more sophisticated operation back end that really took into account more of the seller. And we just feel like the marketplace is all they care about is the buyer, right? And the sale is great, but the seller still needs to fulfill an order efficiently. And that's where we've really tried to focus, is giving a more robust tool set for operators to really address the cost of sale and the cost of fulfillment, not just getting that sale, right? It's all about the other costs. And I think businesses in cannabis today are very quickly waking up to the cost of getting that sale, not just the value of the sale, right? There's a big difference there. And before it's like, just get me the sale, right? And I'll figure it out. Now they're going, oh my gosh, prices are down. I got to figure out how to produce that same quality of product for less, right? And often the inputs aren't getting cheaper for the grower, right? The newts aren't cheaper. The electricity isn't cheaper. The water's not cheaper. The lease isn't cheaper. Nothing's cheaper. What it is the labor. How can you control labor? That's the easiest area to control it, especially in the wholesale. And that's where we've tried to really focus our tools,
Right. Really hitting that problem from both the buyer and the seller perspectives definitely solves that job to be done. And bringing in some of the technology early to the cannabis space was needed so badly in the 5,000 square foot grow where I really cut my teeth as a cultivator in Denver. Our water recipes were written on a whiteboard, and our plant schedules were painter's tape with a Sharpie marker on each tray. And if you spilled too much water on those trays, that tape was gone, and you had to kind of guess even what strain it was. It was another world, man, compared to the software that I've been building now with Viridian or 365 and these folks in the past. the technology really starts to solve that problem, especially bringing in some things from, outside the cannabis industry, like some of the buyer and marketplace experiences that were needed so poorly. I think that you mentioned that with cost being so important, before getting into cannabis, I actually worked in ERPs for manufacturing and non-cannabis goods. Really weird things like stickers or windshields, or the record weird one I did was funeral goods. So we manufactured urns and things like that. So seeing the manufacturing process outside of cannabis and then seeing how everyone was really doing it in the industry was kind of like, how long before the connection is made that these are the same? And some of these software companies have tried to make the bridge and bring those feature sets, but I think it's honestly just taken time for the industry to evolve and for folks to be ready for that kind of nuance, like digging into cost accounting and really finding out the nuance, like the checks and balances of your machines, your fixed assets, how long are employees working on stuff, or how long is work in progress inventory really work in progress. There's so much that it's starting to come down to the bottom line as margins reduce with the current state of the industry.
Yeah, I agree. I think the big thing that, like, and this is like just the nature of a space that's evolving this fast, that traditional tech and traditional industry that services these bigger things won't touch it, right? And so what happens? Well, startups have to fill that void, right?
Yep.
And we all do our best, and
flock.
we're building these planes as we're flying them, right? Like in the industry, not only are we building it, but I would say that the climate that we're flying in is ever evolving every single day, right? And so you can imagine all of these challenges that happen, right? And I think what it's created in cannabis is a lot of bespoke solutions, right? And there's a few all-in-one solutions, but the all-in-one, they tend to not deliver the best in class, right? Of a particular area. They maybe are strong in one area but weak in others, right? And then
or
you
just
also
be
have
obscenely expensive for all
yeah,
in one.
and then you have all these bespoke ones, right? That don't talk to each other. And so you have data here and you have data here and you have data here, and it's warehoused in different areas, right? And so business owners and operators, number one is, your more legacy operator really doesn't understand nor value the data enough to interpret and spend the time to have that inform their decisions, right? They're just kind of growing or producing and doing what they've always done from the illicit market to legal market, and they're there running their business, and that's how they're going to run, right? And for their own, some will be successful and probably a lot of them won't, right? On the other side, there's the people who are like, oh, we've now implemented all these tech, but now we need to try and get everything into one area to understand it, right? And this is where I think we're starting to see, specifically more on the West Coast or on the East Coast. I think it's happening more and more to the West, but really on the East Coast, you're starting to bring in operators who are starting to pull in all of this data and all these things and assess systems and think about, how do we have a vertical solution? How do we get all this data into one area, uniform it, sanitize it, so we can actually make decisions? And I think that's the challenge that all these operators face, right? It's not only is software bespoke, but their own operations are all over the place, right? Each state, it's its own license, its own entity, its own bank account, its own insurance, its own this and that, right? And so it's really hard for them to say, okay, not only are we trying to connect all this tech that we're using across all these markets, but now we're actually trying to connect the markets that are on a different seed to sale, on a different point of sale, on a different thing. And so I think
maybe different compliance even.
It's so immensely challenging for the operators, then also for the tech providers, right, to sell into that and have the right thing. And I think that ours, and that's where for us, it's like, just, you have to stay focused and you got to find the right people. But it is really interesting to see how, like, data, technology, and systems are quickly evolving in the cannabis space, right? Especially as we start to see more sophisticated operators or true corporate people come in that are used to having a full SAP or whatever that is. And they're like, this doesn't work. You got to have that, right? This isn't okay. And I think they're starting to set a new standard for both what tech companies have to deliver, as well as how businesses are going to ultimately have to operate and remain competitive, right? As we think about it,
Right, to keep that profit and maintain those slim margins for now, or to be able to differentiate, you really need to be able to maximize that value created. Maximize everything, really. I'm in the middle of my Lean Six Sigma Green Belt certification. That's all about like process optimization, eliminating waste and things like that. And it's wild to see some of the processes like in the past and how much could have been eliminated by looking at, workflows or just simple steps for a process, and how much that can compound over time. And for bespoke solutions, there's always seems like something that compounds over time as well. as you realize you need to fill another niche in your business, you end up looking for, the right product. There's going to be like 3 or 4. Then you start comparing those features or working with them. But it seems like the ability to integrate or to talk across those spokes is really the secret sauce. Does Apex have an integration option or an API to integrate with as well to kind of
Yeah.
connect some of that data and complete some of the buyer seller picture?
Yeah, absolutely. From our side, we do have an open API. So we have a lot of clients, right? Especially, both from a retail or from a brand side that will start using our API to pull orders into a Tableau, a Power BI, some more enhanced data reporting system that then is driving actions throughout the organization, right? Tying it to those solutions so they can have a live order feed that's now informing other systems or other departments, right? We have integrations with the seed sale tracking system so people don't have to go from our app to Metric, right? They can do everything that they need to do in Metric within our application for wholesale, right? We have a third-party logistics integration. So if you get an order and you have a logistics partner in a state, you can connect with them in the app and assign it to them and have all the data route directly to logistics partner, which then through the API can pull all of that into their fleet management system, right? And so we're in accounting, like QuickBooks, right? Various things. So we're always constantly looking at ways in which we can power more efficiency, greater efficiency within the wholesale supply chain for both the buyers and sellers, as well as then starting to think about the next generation of software, which I really feel is not how are we doing integrations to create efficiency, but then how are we getting the data to drive actions or automation within an organization, right? And
Right.
that's
It's
so
one
much
thing
where
to
our
just have
focus
that
is.
data. It's one thing to have that data and quite another to make actionable decisions or to be able to discern why you're measuring that, not necessarily for the sake of measuring, right? To determine, sell through rate or more than top selling brands, right? Maybe even seasonal things or demographic data you can pull back and pull together.
Yeah, and I think that's when I think on the horizon of technology in this space, right? I think one of the more exciting things that we'll start to see, probably over the next 12 to 24 months, right, is starting. I think what I've found is that there's really only a few companies out there specific to wholesale. There's only 3 of us that even serve the entire market, right? And I think what people are quickly realizing that have really serviced the consumer side, so point of sale, loyalty, that's where so much tech and so much innovation has been driven in cannabis, lately, is that they're starting to realize they neglected the brands and that there's a massive opportunity to help the brand service or understand more that's happening at a consumer or retail level and giving brands tools to connect with the consumer through loyalty to drive actions, all this, right? There's this really massive opportunity and need in it. And then plus what we get excited about is what's that data look like? When you start bringing wholesale and retail data together, how can we do automated reordering or suggested orders or identify merchandise gaps to give people these, things. Oh, you need to run a promo. Here's a great product. There's so much that can happen. And I think for it to occur and for us to get there, it's going to take a few of us kind of really coming together and have a really strategic vision of execution and being willing and able to set the resources aside, which I think is the challenge in this space is we all have our roadmaps. We're all moving a million miles an hour and we're constantly building, right? But how much are we really optimizing our existing features to drive more value in the market? And I think there's always that crux or that kind of balance between the two. And I'm just excited because I think there's a real opportunity between wholesale and point of sale and loyalty to really change the direction of some way the industry is being run today and really power it more and
Connect
address
the
a really
dots.
big challenge that's been super unaddressed. And I think that's where there's this cool opportunity. I think we're really excited about. I think the market overall should hopefully be excited about what maybe can come down the line.
Yeah, man, those features like forecasting, reordering, material resource planning, all of that kind of manufacturing jargon that for those who aren't in the cannabis industry or the manufacturing side of the business is essentially being able to monitor all of your inventory, making sure you have everything you need all of the time, making sure you know what is making the most profit, what you need to sell, if it's concentrates versus pre-rolls in a particular city or market. Pulling decisions like that is so important. And in the ERP realm and in most cannabis software that I've participated in the past, that's been like the holy grail still. Even if there are MRP features or forecasting-esque features, they typically take some significant legwork on the users to make those tools work. So I think that is something to call out, that it takes some more teamwork across some of these bespoke solutions to try to pull that together.
Well, it
And
does. It's a big lift, right? I think and it's still the case, right, today, right? And this is what we encounter a lot of the time with our technology, right? Is that like there's still a big swath of the market, right? That would still rather knowingly run on a spreadsheet. They would rather send Excel of their inventory, never have it live updated, always go back and forth with the buyer, manually create orders, manually send testing, and do everything manually, right? Because they feel like, oh, well, it's how I've done it, it's how it works, it's this thing, right? And I think there's still a big swath of the market, whether that's wholesale, maybe you can't do it in point of sale, but even if you go back to like MRP production side, right? They're like, maybe not. And I think this is where these challenges start to occur, right? Is that the operators themselves maybe still don't see the value in what we deliver, right? There's a lot of clients that we've had who said, "Yeah, we just see you as a sales generation tool, ability to market our products and stuff." And we're like, "Well, yeah, but like we're also a CRM, we're also an email marketing tool, we're also a storefront, we're also workflow and task management, all your automation, all your integrations." And it's the clients
task management are two of my favorite words.
I know, right? And it's like, and once they implement it, right? And they're like, "Oh my God, get light bulbs, game over," right? And it's sticky. It's the convincing to people to evolve. And I think there's this resistance in cannabis, especially in the West Coast, to evolve and change, right? To embrace new technology, to embrace a new way of doing sales, to embrace a new way of that. And that maybe because they've been burnt in the past, right? They've had bad experiences in the past, right? Yeah. Which I understand. A lot of factors. But I think we're all kind of realizing that, like, not only does the ecosystem need to connect, but I think that the market in itself needs to champion and get behind some of these visions, these opportunities, because it will shape and change the paradigm of what the market's going through. And I mean, just like we've been excited about is like this idea of loyalty, is like bringing loyalty into wholesale. In wholesale today, everyone just discounts to get sales, right? That's their motivator to get a sale, right? Well, how would it be if I came into your store and I said, "Rob, hey, first sale with me, man, I'm going to do $1,000 of sponsored marketing for your store with my brand to drive consumers to you. What do you think of that?" And you're like, "Dude, no one's ever approached me about that. I instead of a price break, why don't I actually spend in marketing to pass that forward to you, but all the while it's helping consumers connect with my brand. It's helping my brand equity increase," right? It's this thing. And the reason that's not happening is because we don't have the tools, the physical tools to do it today. And I think this is where like we're always thinking in that direction, is like, how can we change the paradigm of what wholesale businesses have to go through today? Because right now it's always a race to the bottom. And then race to the bottom, what happens race to the bottom? All the small operators, they get forced out. And typically the only ones survive are ones who establish a great brand at the beginning, or they are big, they got a lot of money behind them, right? And I think that ultimately the passion of the product isn't always those. It's the ones that get lost in the market, right? And because they didn't have the sophistication or the tools or the know-how, it's not because they didn't produce amazing products that really helped people. And so it's
there could be some true craftsmanship at those levels that just can't.
There's a unique position of the market right now that I think we're seeing occur, and it will be we're intrigued to see where everything kind of flushes out this year in some certain markets, like Massachusetts, for instance.
Oh yeah, there's going to be some news over there on the East, and I think the market's honestly leaning in your favor there, as brands are quickly gaining more momentum on their own and becoming more of an element of the industry, able to fill shelves at every price bracket or offer products across a brand portfolio and take advantage of like modern or non-cannabis marketing and brand knowledge. To differentiate in the cannabis industry is becoming the challenge, and that's really the way to do it. So empowering those brands in any way allows that to keep building and keep trying to make a mark on their users or consumers.
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the interesting things there on the brand side is that I think a lot of cannabis brands get caught up into marketing to the heavy cannabis consumer, right? Like the picture of the person puffing that vape or holding that joint or that blunt or that thing. We all tend to market like this is going to get you high, right? This is that thing. It's that cannabis culture thing. We get caught up in it. You know what we're all neglecting? And the brand side is, and like we're talking to some big media groups about this that are starting to get into cannabis, is like, you need to be marketing to that demographic that doesn't know you, right? You need to, if I'm a lower dose edible, right? Like I don't need to be marketing to the cannabis channels. I need to be going and marketing to women over 48 that have kids, that love white wine and this, right? Like that, it's broadening our vision of cannabis brands and a cannabis industry to say, this isn't just for the cannabis people. This is for that broader market. How do we reach them? How do we message them in a way that it's not scary, right? Like I have aunts and uncles who will not go to a dispensary.
It's a little too much on the edge.
It's too peripheral. It's kind of edgy. They're uncomfortable. They're older. They don't know. They're going to be talking to someone in their 20s. Like, it just doesn't feel right to them. So what do? They reach out to me and say, hey, I'm suffering from X, Y, and Z. Can you send me something? Right? And that's still the problem in cannabis because no one's talking to them. Dispensaries aren't talking to them. The brands aren't talking to them. And therefore they don't feel accepted and they don't feel welcomed. And I think
it does feel like kind of a double-edged sword on the branding front, and that a lot of the brands do try to market towards that like consummate stoner image, that all-day consumer, which I am an all-day consumer at times, but at other times I'm very sobered up and staying busy with other things. But being that type of consumer, those brands that try to advertise, they don't win me over by showing a guy smoking a blunt. It's like I can do that. I do that regularly. It's all fine. But I think then for someone outside of the industry, that could still be too much. And that's where I think some edibles and like just other methods of consumption have more options outside of the space as far as bringing in those new eyes. But that's definitely something to think about as a brand, is really how to open the doors wider instead of segment the already segmented target audience even further.
Yeah, it's like, how do you niche it even more, right? And it might be, hey, we're going to produce the same similar gummy, right? Or similar this. So it's hard to unless, again, like you can differentiate if you really got something special. But in people are going to emulate, they're going to copy you, and there'll be something similar on market, right?
My peach flavored gummies are
and
unlike
it's
any
emulsified,
other.
so it's this, right? Or it's rosin, and now I'm using rosin as the oil instead. Okay, great. Carve your niche out, own it for a little while, right? See where it goes. Like, totally get it. That's what you got to do. But on the other side was like, okay, not just innovation of products, the innovation of who we're going to, right? Who we're marketing to, how we're approaching our brand, how we're approaching our messaging. And that's the same thing. It's like, if one brand came and said, we're just going to focus on this demographic that no one, and we're going to make them come to dispensaries. We're going to somehow get them to come to dispensaries to buy. That's where we start to change. Again, the destigmatization, but also then you have a brand that's helping older generations or people who were familiar, maybe more uncomfortable with cannabis, to be really welcoming and comfortable with it. And then they tell more people and starts to spread the love of what this plant can really do. And so I think there's that, right? I mean, I said this, when I started in the cannabis industry 9 years ago, someone asked me, like, what's something you think about the future? I was like, the products you see on the shelf today will not be the products you see in 12 years, right? Meaning they'll have some same things, but they'll have different form and factors, right? They'll have different ingredients. They'll have different ways that they're produced. They'll have different, again, I mean, you're starting to see more minor cannabinoid type balanced ones. Now you're seeing more CBN, right? Now CBN's the wonder cannabinoid for sleep and all these things, right? And I think we're starting to see this innovation of the endocannabinoid system and what it can do from a product delivery standpoint, but also the way in which the products are produced, right? What goes into them, and I think that's where it starts to get really interesting. And I think it's somewhat unfortunate, but also it's like the headwinds of the cannabis industry is facing today is going to create some innovation, but I think it will slow some innovation down as well. So it'll just be interesting to see where it plays out.
Yeah, right. It's an industry that will always be innovative, I think, just because of its founding. But it's definitely in a kind of a growing stage here now with all of the investors, everyone getting maybe a little antsy for federalization, a little antsy for those quarterly profits, or kind of like, as you were saying before, business operators just coming to the truth of it with the cost of their operations or the true cost of manufacturing what they're creating, whether it be innovative or not. I mean, also for the sake of innovation, I will say, like, a peach gummy is still a long way from a fruit snack. I'm happy to see that fruit snacks innovated in the time that we've been alive, by adding THC and now adding secondary metabolites that could get even more interesting. I'd eat some terpene fruit snacks.
That's right, man. Yeah.
One was terpinolene, one was like ausamine.
We'll see what happens, right? I've actually got some little terpene samples right here from our friends at Arcane Aromatics, who we're doing a little, trying to create the essence of New England. with
Ooh,
terpenes right now, so it's kind of cool. But
that's awesome. I
yeah,
love
man.
that
I mean,
that science behind it.
and that's the other thing too. It's like the terpenes, the expansion of the endocannabinoid, and understanding the system and all the different cannabinoids that can use and what their benefits are. Starting to do research. I mean, we're just on the horizon of what this plant is going, and medicine's truly going to evolve to. And I think you'll see this separation, bigger degree of separation between the industry of medicinal and recreational, right? And you're truly going to have medicinal products, you have recreational products, and the medicinal products are obviously going to be driven through pharmaceutical, the pharmaceutical industry ultimately, right? You really will have just
Actually finding its way there finally.
yeah.
After all this kind of struggle.
And it's needed, right? There are people who like my aunt who, suffers from odd things. She has an opioid addiction, right? And she's like, hey, they're not giving me as much opioids anymore, right? Like my prescription lasts me a week now. It used to last me a month. I need something to replace this, right? Well, got her a 1-to-1 tincture of THC CBN, right? And she had her for a full week, her first week of complete sleep through the night for a week. First time in 5 years, right? Even with the opioids. Right now, she's not having to take as many opioids, all these other things. The one thing she did say is, I woke up, I took two drops or 2 doses one night thinking, whatever, and woke up feeling really kind of lightheaded and dizzy. And I was like, yeah, it's because you're really stoned, So like, it was one of those where she's still learning about the THC side, but
right, kind of how to consume or where her own thresholds are. But seeing that success is crazy.
Like, think about her. There are hundreds of thousands of people just like her in Missouri, right, that suffer from the same thing, right? All these senior citizens, all these elder people have been overprescribed lots of prescription drugs, and now they're stuck and they're addicted, or they have these issues and they can't deal with the pain because now it's being pulled back from them. This is where cannabis has this opportunity, and I just think the challenge sometimes again in that state is I couldn't find the product for her in that state that she needed, right? That I trusted.
It wasn't the right form factor or the right kind of delivery method or verbiage kind of to present it.
It's where it gets all interesting, right? And so I think the industry still has a long ways to go, but it's exciting to be in it, and it's exciting to see how much it's evolved even over the last 9 years, and for where I think it's ultimately going to head, as well.
Yeah, it's definitely wild. Sometimes it's kind of hard to have relatives, with pain or with something like that going on, and to kind of like half-heartedly, like jokingly recommend cannabis, knowing they're not going to take it seriously, but then when it really could actually benefit them, right? That's hard. So having something to go on that's safer, maybe, for lack of better words, or like a little more curated, I guess, is better. It's definitely lucrative, I think, from the brand perspective, is to capitalize or look at some of those demographics for the profit of the brand, but I mean also just for the well-being of the community, for the society, like for the health of all these folks. I forgot that you were from Branson. Actually, I grew up on the Kansas side of Kansas City, and I think we've ignored it long enough. So go Chiefs! I see those. I see that helmet behind you. I tried to let it be because everyone's only going to hear us, but I grew up in Olathe, Kansas, so we definitely are excited for the Super Bowl run this year, man. I'm looking forward to the next year.
Yeah, me too. Well, you guys could just hop across the border, right? And Kansas probably has a little ways to go before it passes.
Oh man, someone was telling me that there's a Missouri dispensary that's literally on state line. So if you turn left out of the parking lot, you commit a federal crime. But if you turn right, you stay in Missouri.
It's probably the busiest dispensary in the whole state,
I don't know why. What? That's where we need that data, right? To really understand.
It's like, they've had things about, in like Oregon, for instance, the 6 dispensaries that border Idaho do more volume than like 400 other dispensaries put together, right? The same, we have a client in Colorado out in Palisades, right? Grand Junction area. Same thing right on the border of Utah, busiest store every weekend in the whole state, right? And so it's one of those things you got to say, yeah, you got a red state next door, but they love their cannabis and right.
They may be red on the outside, but they're green on the inside. Huh?
That's right.
Yeah. No, I've definitely seen that approach. And I mean, on the completely opposite end though, to play devil's advocate, as someone who smokes concentrates or prefers like a headier smoke, I don't always like all that whitewashing, removing the nature of what the industry was and is. And I think there's like legacy growers that feel a lot of connection to that as well. So I can see, like, I definitely don't want to argue that it should be only one way, right? We do still need those stoner brands to to ring true to the industry and to the community and kind of reflect where we've all still been and where we've
Yeah,
come from.
I mean, I'm a flower smoker through and through, right? So you're not going to find me, typically that's my preferred
Flower,
mechanism
okay.
of consumption, right? And so
Nice.
I'm the same, man. Like, I go into the store, into a dispensary, and if I don't already know the grower I'm looking for, right, it's like pull out the stuff that's the terpiest, the best nose.
Show me the
That's just
terps.
something that's gonna make me almost sneeze when I smell it, right? Or it's gonna make me feel tired when I smell it, or feel like I want to sit down, right? Or have a cookie or whatever it is, right? That's the first thing that I think about, right, when I go to buy. And I'm the same, right? I love, like, my passion has always been the farm side and the legacy cultivation side, right? It's always been my passion. I love small craft cannabis, right? I get more excited going into a 5,000 square foot, biodynamic, the regenerative soil grow that has this suit, and they're doing their own breeding and all this. Like, I get more excited going into that than I do a 500,000 square foot big commercial grow, right? This is not as
Yeah,
sexy
man.
to me, right? I love the small craft side, and I agree. I think there's going to be really this separation in cannabis, right? You're going to have your smaller super, I mean, think about it as beer in a way, right? I don't like to use the exact correlation because I think there's a lot of differences in it, but ultimately you
Similar.
have craft, small craft, both local or within a state, right? With a state distributor, a regional distributor in specific things, and it's all craft, right? And everything's seasonal beers and this and that, and they have their staples, their 3 or 4 staples, but everything else is a seasonal variety that's just innovative, right? It's always innovative. And I think we're gonna find that in cannabis, and I think that's the root of where, again, they're cousins, right? Hops and cannabis, so it's like they're gonna have that. It's gonna be part of it, right? And then I think you're gonna have the other side, which is the commercial side. I think the thing is that
Yeah.
there's the people in the middle, and that's where the challenge is, and that's where it will get really interesting.
Kind of
But for
finding
me,
that or
I hope
fleshing
there's
out.
always craft cannabis. I hope there's always craft flower. I hope there's always craft concentrates. I hope I can always go and find that awesome, whatever. Like, I want that has to be true in this industry. I think it always will be. I just get concerned sometimes that the government ultimately is creating structures and hurdles in a place that only enable the big commercial people to be successful. That's the challenge. I think
That was elegantly put.
the
Yeah.
regulatory, no state has gotten it right yet. Let's say that, right? I mean, in Massachusetts alone, right, they have a rule where when you go to renew your cultivation license, if you haven't sold through haven't sold through more than 70% of your harvest, right, they downscale your canopy by that much, right? So if I have only sold through 60% of my harvest, 40% of my canopy is supposed to be decreased, right?
Wow.
They were supposed to do
Yeah.
this law. They never enacted it. But if they would have, what would happen right now? The market wouldn't be where it's going down as much as it was. If they just came back and said, hey, you didn't sell through all your stuff, we're limiting your canopy down, right? There's rules, and they've tried. I think, though, like, the states don't work with economists enough, like Bo Whitney, or actually people who study the industry in and out to help them inform what a true healthy market would be from a canopy, from a license standpoint, from a population consumption standpoint, from a price standpoint, so it's healthy. They're all just, it's the balance of money versus healthy market, right? And what does all government, what does government go? Money, right? We all go to
Right.
the money, right? And we've had yet to get it right. And I think that's the challenge, right? Or if it's a limited license market, it's the money of the limited license holders that's influencing the politicians. So either way, money is deriving what the decision is. It's not actually what's best for the overall market or the overall consumer base or whatever. And I think that's the challenge
Definitely.
that we'll see if the state agencies can start to figure out. And you think they fumbled it? You think federal legalization is going to be better? We'll see.
Whatever gets blanket rolled out with a few experts
Yeah,
advice at that level.
it'll be interesting.
Yeah, it's definitely not a cannabis problem, right? It's a societal, it's a human problem, kind of, with that balance of profit and the correct actions, or profit and the greater good.
Yeah.
It's a lot going on there. I've been reading a book called The Dispossessed, a sci-fi novel by Ursula K. Le Guin, where basically Earth sends like half the population to the moon at some point, and they live like an anarchist, weird way on the moon, but a capitalistic way on Earth. And a guy is trying to unite the two, and really explore that conversation. Like, what does it mean? Like, why do humans always try to own and profit as soon as they get involved? Or why do they introduce complex hierarchies to introduce more positions on a ladder, to have more middle folks, just to cut the power more when it actually doesn't behoove the society or change anything. So I think there's plenty to be said in research there, man. I hope
Yeah.
cannabis can figure it out
I
for the
hope
greater
so,
good.
and we'll see, and it is hard, right? You want to create a free market. You want to create an open opportunity, right? You want to be able to make this, but in the same sense, it's just that balance, right? And it's a hard balance, it really is. And we'll see, you know, it's now, I think, as the issues in the West start to trickle out east, right? Now I think the conversation starts to become a national conversation, not just well, Oregon, you grow too much weed as it is, and California, you grow too much weed as it is. That's really just a factor of your guys' historical history of cannabis, right? Well, now we know what's happening in markets they didn't necessarily have that, and so now it gets
Right.
a little the conversation changes, I think, and the discussion changes.
Definitely, yeah, and that's an ongoing discussion as things evolve here. I'm looking forward to see what the industry brings to us here around the corner.
Yeah.
And just want to thank you again for joining us on the show today, man. Where can folks find out more about you and more importantly, perhaps Apex Trading?
Yeah, find us, me, LinkedIn, just look me up, John Manlove. There aren't too many Manloves out there, so it should be pretty easy to find me. I'm probably the only one in the cannabis space, so you're good there. And then, apextrading.com. If you're a cannabis brand or retailer or really just interest overall about the market, we're here. You can find us there and submit a form and learn more, about what we do.
Right on, man. Yeah, and definitely I'll throw my hat there as props at previous employers. Apex was definitely a system I was looking to integrate with as a product manager. So I think, folks, there's some features to improve your brand.
Cool.
But thank you again, John.
Really appreciate it. Thanks, Rob.
Thank you for listening to the Apartment 113 podcast. For more information about the show and our range of services, visit apt113.com. We offer certified Ganjier reviews, content writing, cannabis software and operations consulting, bud tender training, and more. With over a decade of experience in the cannabis industry, Apartment 113 is here to help.